Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Tokyo to present the work we conducted this year on Tesla cars. We will disclose for the first time the security issues we found for the last Pontoon at Vancouver. It will be technical, but we will try to be clear and not to go too deep in exploitation techniques. Before to start, who are we? I present with David Bérard and I am Vincent Dehors. We are both working at Synactive, a cybersecurity company focusing mainly on offensive security. We are currently 150 engineers working on different teams, pen test, reverse engineering, development, and also incident response. We both work in the reverse engineering team, where we conduct security assessments, and we are specialized in low-level research, so we mostly work on embedded systems. For those who never heard about Pontoon, it's an offensive cybersecurity competition organized by Zero Day Initiative, ZDI. To participate, the contestants need to compromise the target and to get arbitrary code execution, most of the time remotely. There are several Pontoon every year. The main event is at Vancouver. Starting next year, there will be a new Pontoon contest which takes place in Tokyo in January. This will be dedicated to automotive targets like electric car chargers, infotainment systems, and also other car components. We already looked into Tesla cars for the Pontoon 2022. At this time, we found a bug in the network manager that allowed us to compromise the infotainment from the Wi-Fi and without user interaction. We also found a sandbox escape and two kernel vulnerabilities that added more impact to the attack. We started our research in December, mostly on our free time. We first found a logic bug in a security component called the security gateway, and it turned out that it was easy to exploit. In January, we focused on the Bluetooth attack surface in the infotainment system. And 2 months later, we had another Pontoon entry. So we had a few weeks left before the contest, and we tried to chain these two exploits. To be able to do that, we needed a way to elevate our privileges after the Bluetooth remote code execution. 1 week before the deadline, we started to look for privilege escalation targeting the Linux kernel. We found a bug with a funny attack surface, and we exploited just before the contest. Like the previous year, we finished to develop the exploit at Vancouver during the contest. And the funny thing is that we registered and took the plane without an exploit working. And during the plane, I broke my computer by dropping some tea on it. So I had to buy a new laptop after the landing, and it was a little bit stressful. So let's take a look at the Tesla car architecture. The main goal is to separate two worlds, the multimedia domain and the vehicle domain. In the multimedia domain, there are components that are not really important for the car to function. For example, we often find an infotainment. This is the display in the middle of the car that provides entertainment features. The passenger safety should not be impacted if an attacker succeeds in compromising one of these multimedia components. But they are interconnected with vehicle components because they need to exchange some information like car metrics or even to provide over-the-air updates. In Tesla architecture, a component called the security gateway ensures that only allowed and expected communication is made between these two worlds. In the vehicle domain, most of the components are electric boards dedicated to control physically the car. These components are also called ECUs. These units are generally connected together using CAN buses. This is the kind of network we often see in the automotive world. Here is what looks like the infotainment board on Tesla cars. It contains all the components we will speak about in this talk. The infotainment processor is an Intel SoC for older versions, and now it's a AMD one. Both use an x86 architecture. There is also a Wi-Fi Bluetooth module connected to the main CPU through the PCI bus. And on the same board, there is the security gateway, which is a PowerPC MCU. It is connected to the infotainment processor using Ethernet. It has multiple access to CAN buses, and basically it is able to communicate with mostly everything in the car. To do this research, we needed hardware. We didn't buy a car because it is expensive. Hopefully, the infotainment board is pretty standalone. You can just power the board with a display and it works. We bought several boards from the US eBay, and Tesla also sent us two boards, one Intel-based and one Ryzen-based. Also, Tesla has a special program for security researchers. If you ever manage to get root on your infotainment, they will give you an SSH access during 1 year to connect to this infotainment. It's a way to encourage hackers to report vulnerabilities. So after 2022, we had an SSH access, and which was really useful to develop an exploit. Now we will present the exploit chain we used during the contest. We chained 3 different exploits. The entry point is the Bluetooth, so the attacker starts remotely. However, the first exploit requires to be paired to the car. So the threat model is either a compromised phone connected to the car or an attacker with a physical access to the display. For the competition, it is allowed to touch the screen. The first exploit allows us to get code execution in a userland service called BSA server. Then we chain it with a privileged escalation to get kernel code execution. And finally, the last exploit communicates with the security gateway and compromises it. The usual workflow when looking for security bug, and especially on closed source program, is to first do static analysis. We can use tools like Ghidra or IDA. We also use dynamic instrumentation, mostly to confirm attack surface and to develop the exploit. So that we add our SSH access, so we can send the debugger on the target and monitor what is going on at runtime. Also, to be able to send data on the Bluetooth from our laptop, we modified BlueZ to include the exploit code. BlueZ is a popular Bluetooth stack on Linux. So let's start with the entry point, the Bluetooth. On Tesla cars, the Bluetooth allows communication between the car and a mobile phone. It can be used to receive messages, to make voice calls, and also to play music. The vulnerability we used is located in the music playback feature. How the Bluetooth is implemented in the car? Let's follow the path of a Bluetooth packet when it is sent to the car. First, it is received by the Wi-Fi Bluetooth chip, which sends it to the main processor by encapsulating the packet in the HCI protocol. It is sent over a serial link. The Linux kernel just forwards the data to a userland process. And all supported Bluetooth standards are implemented in two services, BSA server and BTD. These two programs contain a whole Bluetooth stack. And finally, BTD can communicate with another application developed by Tesla, which is called Qt Car Bluetooth. Why did we target BSA server in the first place? This binary is really interesting for an attacker. It contains an enormous attack surface. It is written in C, so there is a high probability of finding memory bugs. Also, it uses a custom heap allocator. But more importantly, this binary is compiled without PIE. In fact, this is the main reason why we looked into it. PIE means position independence executable, and without this feature, the section of a binary is loaded in memory at fixed address. For all these reasons, this program is a natural target for an attacker. However, the infotainment is heavily hardened, and there are several sandboxes which are defined for each service, and including BSA server. The cool things about Bluetooth is that most implementations are using standards, so you can find public documentation, but there are a lot of different protocols. You can see on the screen a list of acronyms. Each one is a valid Bluetooth protocol, and this is only a small portion of all existing protocols. For the audio playback feature, there are 4 important profiles: ASDP, A2DP, AVRCP, and BIP. We will only speak about BIP, which stands for Basic Imaging. It allows the phone to send covert art image to the car to be displayed in the user interface. The bug we found is located in the BIP protocol. After the pairing, the phone can configure an audio playback. The car asks for the phone a list of available covert art pictures. BIP uses the OBEX protocol, which stands for Object Exchange. The phone sends back its images, also using OBEX. You can see on the slide the OBEX response. This is an XML file containing a list of images. And finally, the car chooses one image, the one it wants to display, and download it. The vulnerability we use is a heap overflow in the BIP parsing function. This function is responsible of extracting information from the XML file. Parsing results are stored in a big structure with a fixed size. In the XML content, which is defined by Bluetooth standard, there is an XML tag called attachment that can be present multiple times. There is no limit in the specification, but the implementation has a limit of 256 items because of a bug in the code. Anyway, there is an overflow starting from only 38 attachments. After that, the parser will try to write control data after the end of the allocation. You can see an example of an XML file that triggers the bug. BSA server uses a custom heap allocator, so the exploitation technique will be specific to this allocator. The allocations are stored in the data section of the program. And without randomization, their addresses are known because they never change. So with our bug, we can overwrite after the end of an allocation, and we overwrite the linked list of 3 chunks. This gives directly an arbitrary write primitive. So we can write what we want, where we want in memory. With a unique arbitrary writes, our exploit overwrites a global variable. This variable is the application timer queue that allowed us to add a fake timer in the system. When the main loop processes our fake timer, a controlled function pointer is called. This is an arbitrary call primitive, and we use it to redirect the execution flow to a stack pivot that allows us to execute a rope chain. And after that, a shellcode is executed, and we can load a bigger program in memory. We call this program stage 1. The lack of ASLR makes the exploitation a lot easier because all addresses are known. With this exploit, we can inject a C program in the infotainment system. That means this is a valid entry for Punch1, but the attack is still not very impactful. Indeed, every service has its own dedicated UID, and all sandboxes in the system are activated. The first sandbox is kfol. This is used to add sec controls to filter syscalls. Then there is AppArmor, which defines which file can be used and prevents from executing other programs. And finally, there is also mini-jail that puts BSA server in a dedicated route and configure an anti-network namespace. So basically, we can only do what is expected for this Bluetooth service. And there are 2 legitimate interfaces. The first one is to be able to communicate with the Bluetooth chip to send and receive HCI packet. And also, a Unix socket can be used to communicate with another program called BTD.
So, as Vincent said, BSA server can communicate with the Bluetooth chipset through TTY. On this TTY, the HCI protocol is used. BSA server is responsible of loading the Bluetooth firmware while starting. This is done with multiple vendor HCI commands. At least 2 of these commands allow writing to the chipset memory. Since we have code execution inside the BIC server process, we can use those commands to write to the Bluetooth chipset internal memory. As the Bluetooth firmware is in the internal chipset memory, it's possible to gain code execution in the Bluetooth firmware. But it's not particularly interesting because the almost unique attack surface from there is BIC server. The Bluetooth chipset is a combo Wi-Fi plus Bluetooth. Some components are shared between the 2 parts. The internal RAM memory is shared between the 2 parts, and the RAM dedicated to the Wi-Fi is mapped inside the Bluetooth part. Fortunately, the Wi-Fi RAM can be directly written by the vendor HCI command. So BIC server is able to write inside the Wi-Fi RAM memory through HCI protocol. While the system boot, the firmware is loaded inside the RAM memory and executed from there. So we can patch this firmware and gain code execution inside the Wi-Fi chipset. As the Wi-Fi is based on an ARM core, we can easily build our own code and inject it. It's our stage 2. To gain code execution, we apply some pretty simple patches. The stage 2 code is injected into unused memory range, and after, the idle task of the Wi-Fi operating system is patched to jump on the injected code. The Wi-Fi chipset is much more interesting than the Bluetooth one for an attacker. It's connected through PCI Express to the system and use DMA and mailbox to communicate with the main processor. And it relies on a complex Linux driver called BCMD-HD. Our stage 2 is well placed to attack this driver. For DMA, there is IOMMU in place, so it's not that easy to reach the main processor memory. To communicate together, the firmware and the driver need to share some information. Some structures are shared. This is not really shared memory. Structures are copied from the chipset memory during the startup of the driver and when the firmware do a special mailbox interrupt. So the firmware can modify this structure while running and ask the driver to reload them. As you can imagine, there is a vulnerability while the driver uses these structures. One of the offsets in the structure is used without being checked first. This offset is used to point to a memory zone inside the chipset memory. This chipset memory is mapped by the Linux driver with the IO remap function, so in the vmalloc region. So our stage 2 inside the Wi-Fi firmware can use this vulnerability to write after the mapped zone in the vmalloc region. To continue the exploit, we need to find a victim to write on. A good candidate is process stacks. These stacks are allocated by the kernel and are located in the vmalloc region. Stage 1 inside the BSA server can spray processes stacks by forking multiple times. Write to a kernel stack while the task is in kernel mode give code execution as it allows starting a rope chain. So stage 1 child run can be blocked in kernel mode by calling a blocking syscall. But we need to be sure to write in the kernel stack and at a good offset. Fortunately, a big buffer is allocated by the GPU driver. This makes the offset between the Wi-Fi mapping and the GPU mapping fixed. And so the offset with the kernel stack spread just after the GPU allocation is known. So here is the plan. Stage 1 fork many times to spray many process kernel stacks, block them in the clock nanosleep syscall, and then stage 2, use the driver vulnerability to write inside one of the stack. And then we wait the unblock of the clock nanosleep syscall to have our opchain started. To continue the exploit, we need to know the value of the kernel ASLR. We can use multiple ways to get it. We can, for example, use a special gadget in our opchain to get the ASLR value in one of the stage 1 forked process. Or we can use a known method. The ASLR is pretty bad on the platform. There is only a few bits of random. A blog post called EntryBleed describes a method to get the ASLR value with a cache side channel attack, and a very similar method works on the Tesla. As it's easier, we use this method to get the ASLR value. We can now write our opchain to get a root. Here is our strategy. First, we use saved register values that are stored just after the last return address as a opchain. The return address is patched by the vulnerability to a return gadget. So the first opchain gets executed when the clock nanosleep syscall in block. But this opchain inside the saved register is pretty small. To have more space, we choose to copy more data in the stack by using the copy from user function and execute a second opchain. This second opchain is basic. We patch the powerof command string in the kernel data with the shell command we want to execute. And we call the powerof work function to execute the command. As the process has to end correctly, we finish the opchain by calling the doExit function. So here is the situation. We now have a stage 3 running as root on the infotainment system. And this stage 3 is not restricted by any sandbox. It's now possible to communicate with the gateway over the Ethernet network. Let's see how to have a stage 4 running on the gateway. As Vincent showed you at the beginning of this presentation, the security gateway is an MCU on the same PCB as the infotainment. It's running on a NXP PowerPC SoC and use FreeRTOS as the operating system. It has no hardware-based secure boot and uses its internal flash for all the software. The gateway is connected to the internal Ethernet network and to various CAN buses. The main feature of the gateway is to filter CAN messages from the infotainment. It also provides sensitive information to the other components, like the car unique number or the state of the paid option, like the autopilot. And the gateway is responsible of doing the update of the other ECUs. We will see this functionality in details. Regarding the software, the gateway has 3 different operation modes. Firstly, the bootloader mode. It provides software secure boot and start the other mode. It also has a recovery mode to boot the gateway from the network. Secondly, the updater mode. This mode is used to update other ECU firmwares or the gateway itself. And there is the main application mode that is used during operation. This mode gives filtered access to the CAN buses to the infotainment. There are commands in the main application mode to make the gateway reboots in updater mode. For the exploitation, we will describe a logic bug, a time of check, time of use bug. So there is no memory bug in this part. Regarding memory bug, even if the system can't have advanced mitigation, the software is well developed and we didn't find any memory bug. Here is how the updater mode starts. First, the infotainment system uploads the updater binary on the gateway SD card by using the XFAIR protocol. After that, the infotainment sends the reboot for update UDP command. The gateway reboots, and the bootloader loads the updater binary from the SD card to its RAM memory, check the signature, and execute it. Here is the workflow to update ECUs. In the first phase, the update mode fetches the ECU firmware through TFTP on the infotainment. The update firmware is saved on the SD card and the signature of the update is verified. In the second phase, the updater applies the update. The updater uses the file on the SD card to start the upgrade of the ECU through the CAN buses. The main application mode and the bootloader can also be updated by the same way. The update is done by writing to the internal flash of the gateway MCU. The updater can do multiple updates at the same time. It fetches multiple files by TFTP and schedules them to be applied. So here is the logical bug. First, we can make the updater to fetch 2 times the same file. The first time, the TFTP server on the infotainment sends the valid file. So the signature is correct and the ECU update is scheduled. For the second fetch, the TFTP server sends an invalid file. This overrides the file on the SD card, and even if the signature is bad, the file is kept on the SD card. And the first update remains scheduled. On the second updater phase, the signature is not rechecked, so the invalid file update will be applied. As you see, this bug allows bypassing the signature check and allows applying arbitrary updates. Let's see how to gain code execution inside the gateway with this. The bootloader is responsible of doing software secure boot. Because there is no hardware secure boot on the chipset, the updater is never checked. The bootloader can be replaced by the updater bug we saw. This can be used to gain code execution inside the bootloader, but we choose to just patch the original version. We simply remove the software secure boot from the bootloader, so we can use the reboot for update functionality to boot an arbitrary updater binary. We injected our code inside the original updater binary, so our code can reuse the function already present in the updater binary. For example, it's easy to send CAN messages from our injected code by using the CAN write function. So that's it. We now have a stage 4 running on the security gateway that can send CAN messages to the other ECUs. This is the end of our Pont1 chain. So to sum up, we exploited a heap overflow to gain code execution inside the BSA server process. From BSA server, we use the lack of isolation between the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth firmware to execute code inside the Wi-Fi firmware. From the Wi-Fi firmware on the stage 1, we exploited out-of-band write to execute commands as root and run an unrestricted binary that can communicate over Ethernet. From this unrestricted process, we exploited a logic bug inside the gateway to execute arbitrary code on it. And from this code, we can send CAN messages. Tesla has quickly made some fixes and also has improved the hardening of the system. BSA server is no more an exception and is a PIE binary like the other services. And of course, the vulnerability has been patched. The BCMDHD vulnerability has been patched, and the other out-of-bound read were also patched. The gateway has been improved. The temporary files on the SD card have now a special name after the signature verification. The manifest file is now signed, and if a signature check fails, temporary files are now removed from the SD card. Our Tesla entry was the first tier 2 of the competition. Could have been a tier 1, but we chose to split the entry to limit the risk in case of a failure of one of the bugs. This year, with Synactive, we were glad to be master of pawn with other entry on operating system on the hypervisors. To conclude, it was not a so long work this year. We now have a strong knowledge of the target with almost 3 years of working on it. We have the hardware, we have debug facilities, and this year BSA server was easy to exploit because it was not well hardened. We got support from Tesla. They provide us an ECU up-to-date that can receive updates. They give us firmware through ZDI. And the version for Pontoon was freezed 1 month before the event, so we had time to adjust our exploits. So for all of this, we want to thank them. It was a very fun research, and we won the car, so we will be able to do research on it. So we are done. If you have any question, do not hesitate.
All right, thank you. We will now like to move on to the Q&A session. Because of the lack of time, we would like to limit the question to only one question. The person in the front, please raise your question if you have any. Please speak.
And great presentation. It was very knowledgeable. And my question is, can you guys send a legitimate CAN message through the exploited security gateways? It means opening doors, starting the motors, and rotating the steerings like that.
Yeah. At the time of when we write the exploit, we didn't add a car, so we weren't able to test many things. But in 2022, we did an exploit that can open the door, that can open the trunk, turn on the light, etc. So I don't know exactly what we can do, but we can do more than this, but we didn't test it.
I'm not quite sure if the Tesla allowed you guys to disclosure, but I just wondered if the Tesla added any feature to distinguish legitimate CAN messages or not in the area of the internal CAN area network. How did you guys feel about it?
We didn't check on CAN messages, but some of them can be authenticated. So we don't know if the security gateway would have been able to send authenticated messages on the CAN.
Okay, thank you very much.